Imagine this. Just yesterday, he was a millionaire. A penthouse in Dubai, a Lamborghini, interviews on Bloomberg. Suddenly, today he is standing behind a supermarket cashier, barely making ends meet. In Japan, dozens of crypto investors threw themselves from windows after the Terra Luna collapse. In Europe, a former mathematics professor who lost everything in FTX now works as a taxi driver and hides his past even from his children. And in the United States, a lawyer who made a fortune in cryptocurrency lost it all in one night and left a suicide note. But here is the twist. These are not rare cases. This is a new epidemic. Cryptocurrency promised freedom, but for millions, it became like a casino. Welcome to a world of ruined lives, lost hope, and silence where luxury once thrived. Now listen to this. These are not just stories about money. They are about the human cost of crypto gambling. I wake up every morning, and the first thing I do is check my phone. Even though it makes no sense, the balance will not change. Zeros will stay zeros. I just cannot believe it ended like this, said Michael, a former programmer from San Francisco, in an interview cited by The Guardian in 2023. In 2019, he invested $400,000, his savings and money from selling an apartment, into Ethereum and tokens from DeFi projects. At the peak, it turned into $2,800,000. He quit his corporate job, bought a Tesla, started building a startup. But then in 2022, when the market crashed, it all vanished in a few weeks. Today, Michael works as a mathematics instructor at college. His salary is $58,000 a year. He said, "I was a millionaire. Now I'm back in line for a home loan. It all feels like a dream, but a nightmare." Michael's story is not unique. Reuters reported on a South Korean investor named Cho. He was a lawyer with a successful practice and had saved about $900,000. In 2021, he invested in Luna and Terra USD. His portfolio grew to $4 million. He thought about leaving law and starting a charity. But after the Terra collapse, he was left only with debts. Today he works as a night taxi driver in Seoul. His words in an interview sounded like a verdict on an entire era. "I defended people in courts for 20 years, but I could not protect myself from my own greed." But not everyone had a chance to start over. In May 2022, South Korean media, later confirmed by Reuters, reported on a man who took his own life in Seoul after the Terra crash. His note contained just a few lines. "I was not a gambler. I was a father. Forgive me." His story became a symbol of how the crypto market can turn into a deadly trap. In the United States, the tragedy of Christopher Cavano, a former trader from Florida, made headlines. He lost more than $600,000 in the FTX collapse. Bloomberg reported that in December 2022, his body was found in a motel. Next to him was a phone, the screen open to his frozen FTX account. Stories like these multiplied. On Reddit, threads called Crypto Loss Support Group appeared. People wrote, "I lost my house and now live in my parents' basement. I was a lawyer. Now I consult on insurance for $15 an hour." One of the most shocking cases was reported by Financial Times. It is the story of Paul, a British mathematician and former university lecturer. He spent his life teaching statistics and probability theory. In 2020, he decided he could use his knowledge to beat the market. He invested £200,000 in altcoins. In a year, it grew to £1,500,000. Paul left the university, bought a house. But in 2022, when the market crashed, he lost everything. Today, he works in a warehouse in a London suburb. He said in an interview, "I spent my life teaching students that probability is always on the side of the casino. And yet, I was the one betting against mathematics." These words capture the essence of cryptomania. People with knowledge, education, and experience fell into the same trap as teenagers with a phone. Because here, emotions, not formulas, ruled. CNBC in 2023 shared another story. A woman named Sarah from New York, a lawyer with 15 years of experience, invested $700,000 in tokens on Binance and FTX. She thought she would retire early. In November 2022, she had less than $10,000 left. Today, she works as a sales associate in a clothing store. She said, "My name was on the lists of lawyers in New York State. Now my name is on the list of credit agency debtors. Stories like these read like confessions, and they show that crypto is not just a market. It is a game where the stakes are a whole life. And in the end, the main question, if crypto works by the same rules as a casino, but the stakes are hundreds of times higher, can we even call it an investment? Or is it a new form of global gambling disguised in beautiful words about the future? Would you have believed them back then? Can a fair system be built on money if its very essence is a game? Imagine a man who spent his entire life fighting gambling. He swore he would never step into a casino. He had enough stories of lost homes, broken marriages, shattered lives. And yet, suddenly, he woke up one day with no apartment, no savings, debts he could not explain to himself or his family. Here's the twist. He had never placed a single bet on roulette, never spun the slot machines. His casino was digital. It was called the crypto market. The media gave it different names. Digital gambling, Financial Times. Bitcoin casino for the masses, Bloomberg. But the essence was the same. Cryptomania works by the same rules as gambling addiction. Only the stakes were higher than ever. If in Las Vegas you could lose a month's salary in one night, in crypto, millions vanished in seconds. In 2021, a South Korean investor, whose name the Guardian hides at the family's request, invested all his savings in Terra USD and Luna tokens. In a few weeks, his capital turned to dust. Reuters reported dozens of suicides linked to the collapse. A relative said he was not a gambler. He believed he was investing in the future. But that was the paradox. People who despised gambling became part of the largest casino on the planet. At first glance, crypto promised transparency, technology, a new system without intermediaries. It was presented as liberation from the old financial system, an alternative to banks that had deceived depositors for decades. And that is why millions believed. CoinDesk in 2021 wrote, "Cryptocurrencies are not just an asset, they are a social movement." Young people sold cars, took loans, convinced their parents this was a new era. If you do not invest in Bitcoin, you will miss the future. The illusion of trust was built on the same energy as faith in saints or cult leaders. Here lies the main paradox. A casino always looks suspicious. We know the roulette wheel is against us. But crypto disguised itself as a rational choice. Professors of economics, IT specialists, even doctors entered it. And the smarter the person, the stronger the trap worked. I am not stupid, so I understand the risks. Forbes called this the illusion of control, the most dangerous psychological mistake of an investor. The scheme was simple. Every new growth cycle created the feeling that this time it would be different. In 2017, Bitcoin at $20,000. In 2021, almost $69,000. People saw only the chart moving up. Like in a casino, where after 10 losses, a player is sure the next bet will win. Bloomberg wrote, "The FOMO effect in crypto is stronger than in any other asset. It presses not on numbers, but on a person's identity. If you do not buy Bitcoin, it is as if you stand outside history." And here is the key. Cryptomania is not just about money. It is about a sense of belonging, the illusion of special access, being part of an elite. That is why the stories of downfall sound even scarier than casino stories. Because in people's eyes, this was not entertainment, it was destiny. But what is common between a gambler in front of a slot machine and an IT specialist in New York checking Ethereum charts every night? The answer, everything. The same neural mechanisms, the same dopamine, the same addiction to the next bet. The only difference is that the crypto market is global. And when it collapses, it is not only the fate of individual players that crumbles, but entire industries. They lived in penthouses. They had yachts, car collections, contracts with banks and investment funds. They were stars of a new era. And then suddenly, it all vanished. Stories of ruined crypto millionaires today sound like ancient tragedies. Yesterday, they were on the covers of Forbes, and today they work in call centers or drive taxis. Financial Times in 2023 wrote about a generation of former crypto kings. One symbol became Eric Finman, the teenage Bitcoin millionaire. In 2011, he bought Bitcoins for $12 each, and by 2017, it had turned into millions. He gave interviews to CNN, talking about freedom from the old economy. But then, in 2022, he admitted almost all the money was lost in crashes and failed altcoins. Today, he hosts a podcast and earns money from advertising. I am no longer a millionaire. I am just a guy who believed in the fairy tale too early. Reuters reports even darker stories. Michael Hurst, a former trader from Chicago, held a crypto portfolio worth $7 million in 2021. After the collapse of Terra and FTX, he was left with a $600,000 debt to the bank. Today, he works as a night security guard at a warehouse. He said, "The hardest part is not losing the money. The hardest part is realizing I let my family down. My wife left, my kids do not call anymore." The Guardian told the story of a British entrepreneur named Simon, surname withheld for ethical reasons. In 2020, he closed his business and invested everything in Ethereum. At its peak, he had more than £3 million. When the market crashed in 2022, he lost almost everything. Now he works as a food delivery driver in London. "People look at my bike and do not know I lost more than many earn in a lifetime." And there are thousands of such stories. CNBC in a special report called it the lost generation of crypto millionaires. Young people who thought they had changed their lives forever suddenly found themselves at the bottom. But the harshest part is the public humiliation. In a classic casino, losses remain private. In crypto, the collapse is permanent, recorded on the blockchain, in the news, in memes. Sam Bankman-Fried, once called the savior of the industry, sat in a New York courtroom in a cheap suit. The prosecutor read the charges. He stole billions using the trust of millions. Investors who lost their savings cried in the courtroom. AP News reported, a young woman shouted, "He ruined my life, and now he pretends it was just a mistake." Do Kwon, called the Steve Jobs of crypto, in South Korea, looked broken after his arrest in Montenegro. His photo from the detention cell spread across the internet. Where a confident billionaire in expensive suits once sat, now there was a man in a cheap hoodie, powerless and hopeless. Even those who broke no law were on their knees. In 2022, CNBC wrote about former crypto traders who openly admitted they now worked as cashiers, waiters, or sales consultants in electronic stores. "We were sure we found a system that always wins. Now I advise people on which $300 smartphone to buy, and every time I think about how I used to spend that much on one meal." The Wall Street Journal called this the cruelest social experiment of the decade. Because in crypto, the fall is not only financial. It is social, psychological, and reputational. A person considered a genius yesterday becomes a meme tomorrow. But there is another aspect in this drama. Millions of investors who trusted crypto influencers were left with nothing, while the influencers disappeared. On YouTube and Twitter in 2021, they showed villas and yachts, promising easy millions. By 2023, many quietly deleted their accounts. Yet thousands of their followers write, "We followed you. Where are you now?" In these stories lies the paradox of cryptomania. Casinos take money but allow you to remain anonymous. Crypto takes money, hope, family, and reputation. In every new mania, there are always heroes. People who become symbols of success. Their stories work better than any advertisement. In the 19th century, it was gold miners who supposedly got rich in California overnight. In the 1990s, it was dot-com entrepreneurs who took companies public in a few years. In crypto, there were idols of a new kind. Forbes in 2021 published a list called Crypto's Richest, and at the top were names familiar to millions today. Changpeng Zhao, better known as CZ, founder of Binance. Sam Bankman-Fried, a young billionaire and the face of FTX. Do Kwon, a South Korean visionary, promising stable money for a new generation. Their stories were presented as proof. If they could do it, anyone could. Bloomberg described Sam Bankman-Fried as a crypto version of Warren Buffett, even though his business was far from a traditional investment model. In interviews with the New York Times, he said, "I am not a gambler. I just optimize probabilities." But here's the twist. For viewers, he looked like a mathematician, a cold genius playing by formulas. For the industry, he was a living symbol, young, rich, in shorts with curly hair, and it was all thanks to crypto. The influence of Sam or CZ worked like a drug. People did not ask, what is behind these billions? They thought, if he did it, I can too. Financial Times called it crypto gold rush syndrome. But heroes are needed not only for inspiration. They are needed to cover the system. Every bubble relies on trust, and trust is built through faces. Look at Do Kwon, creator of Terra. In early 2022, his project was considered revolutionary. Terra USD promised stability that other tokens could not deliver. It was supposedly a stablecoin, pegged to the dollar but algorithmically managed. Media called it the bank killer. He said, "We are creating money for a new economy." Reuters noted that even institutional funds invested in the project. At one point, Terra's market cap exceeded $40 billion. But this stability was an illusion, dependent on a continuous flow of new investors. When the flow stopped, the entire system collapsed in days. For ordinary people, it was a shock. They did not see the complex economics or risks. They saw a charismatic leader promising the future. That is how gambling works too. A casino player remembers the stories of jackpot winners and never thinks of the thousands who lost. CoinDesk wrote in analysis, "The crypto market is built not on technology, but on narratives. These narratives spread through Twitter, YouTube, and Telegram. Each new successful investor became a preacher convincing millions. It is not too late to enter." The illusion was strengthened by the crowd effect. In 2021, according to Chainalysis, more than 300 million people worldwide had crypto wallets. But the reality was most held less than $1,000. Huge fortunes were concentrated in a few addresses. Like in a casino, few won, millions lost. The Guardian wrote, "Crypto is a perfect storm between hope and greed. People invest not because they believe in blockchain, but because they believe in the neighbor who suddenly bought a car." It is important to understand, Cryptomania did not appear in a vacuum. It was preceded by the pandemic, lockdowns, and a crisis of trust in traditional institutions. When the Federal Reserve printed trillions of dollars, young people saw proof. Old money no longer works. Crypto seemed like an alternative. In the United States, according to Pew Research, 1 in 6 Americans under 30 had tried cryptocurrency. This generation grew up with memes, YouTube, and Reddit. In this culture, crypto looked not like an investment, but like a movement, almost a religion. But this is when the foundation of the future disaster was laid. Belief in the infallibility of the market led people to ignore risks. They thought they were beating the system. In reality, the system was beating them. And here is the question, where is the line? Between investment and gambling? Buying Bitcoin at $1,000 and waiting for growth, that is investment. But taking a loan, mortgaging a house, and entering the market hoping for quick gains, that is pure gambling. The Wall Street Journal in 2022 called crypto the most expensive illusion of control in history. And as the events of the following years would show, this illusion cost millions of people not only money but life itself. Collapse always comes suddenly. You check the price in the evening, everything seems fine. In the morning, you open the app, and suddenly, zeros. That is how empires fell that yesterday seemed unshakable. In May 2022, the algorithmic stablecoin Terra USD began losing its peg to the dollar. On the first day, it dropped 2%. It seemed small, but on the crypto market, it became a signal of panic. In 3 days, Luna's market cap crashed from $40 billion to almost zero. Bloomberg wrote, "This was the moment when millions of people lost everything at once." On Reddit, hundreds of posts appeared. People wrote, "I invested $250,000. Now I have 900. I have no words." Another user said, "I had a house, a mortgage. Now I owe the bank. I have nothing." Reuters later reported dozens of confirmed suicides in South Korea and the United States linked to the Terra collapse. Do Kwon, the founder, only a week before the disaster tweeted, "Luna is stronger than ever. Panic is a chance for the timid. We will survive this storm." But then, the storm swallowed him. In 2023, he was arrested in Montenegro on forged documents, and both the United States and South Korea charged him with billions in fraud. But Terra was not the only case. Just a few months later, the world was shaken by another collapse, the legendary exchange FTX. In November 2022, Reuters published the headline, "FTX files for bankruptcy. $8 billion hole in balance sheet." For millions of clients, it sounded like a sentence. FTX advertised itself as the most reliable platform for trading cryptocurrency. Sam Bankman-Fried promised transparency and security. At the Super Bowl, his company spent millions on ads, inviting Tom Brady and Larry David. And no one could believe that behind all of this there was chaos. When the SEC investigation revealed the details, the world gasped. Client funds were not kept safe. They were used to finance risky trades at the sister company Alameda Research. It was a classic casino scheme, wrote the Wall Street Journal. Sam was not just holding people's money. He was placing it on the table, playing a giant roulette game with bets measured in billions. At a congressional hearing, Senator John Tester said, "This is not even investing. It is a high-tech casino where every teenager with a phone can enter." And indeed, crypto required no license, no passport, no experience. You just had to download an app and click a button. The thrill of instant betting with $1 million in the air. The Guardian wrote in December 2022, a young generation fell into a trap of illusion. They thought they were investing. In reality, they were playing a game where the rules were written by those who always win. These stories always follow the same pattern. First comes euphoria. People boast about profits. TikTok videos appear, how I made $50,000 in a week on crypto. Then come the first warning signs. Withdrawals take longer, prices dip slightly, but the crowd believes it is temporary. And then, silence. The exchange blocks withdrawals. The app does not open. In one moment, hundreds of thousands of users are left only with screenshots of old balances that will never return. The stories of fallen crypto heroes revealed the truth. Unlike in a casino, where a single player loses, here entire generations lost. In November 2022, the Financial Times published a column, "Collapse of FTX Shatters Trust in Digital Assets." It said plainly, decades will be needed to restore trust destroyed in days. But the numbers are worse than the headlines. Millions of private investors lost savings. Pension funds that trusted FTX lost millions. Even governments, like the Bahamas, were caught in the disaster. And all of this, under the guise of investment. Step back, and we see the same pattern as a casino. The illusion of control, the euphoria of quick wins, and the inevitable collapse when the house takes its due. In that moment, cryptomania stopped being an alternative to the system. It became the system itself, a system of addiction where the stakes are higher than lives.